I've made plenty of domino decisions in my life. Decisions that may have seemed simple at the time, but when I look back, I realize it led to a series of events and ultimately shaped my life, or at least part of it, in a significantly and potentially unexpected way. That's certainly true of my decision to purchase my first motorcycle. When I first became interested in motorcycling, I was drawn to my former boss's motorcycle, a Honda CB from the 1980s. I just loved the aesthetic of the bike. The design seemed so timeless, minimal plastic, straight lines. So when I started looking for a motorcycle for myself, I had those qualities in mind. And ultimately I went with the Triumph Bonneville. I didn't really think about the function of it. I didn't ask myself questions that I'd probably ask myself now before buying a new bike. Questions like, do I want to ride off-road? Do I plan on riding with a passenger? Am I going to use it for long trips or more for local trips? As I look back on my motorcycle journey, I realize that a seemingly simple decision about what type of motorcycle to purchase has had an incredible effect on my motorcycling journey. To the outsider, the non-rider, it might seem that a motorcycle is just a motorcycle, a vehicle that has two wheels and is ridden on the road just like any other vehicle. But ultimately, based on the type of motorcycle that you ride, it greatly shapes things like how often you ride, how long of a distance you ride, the types of people you ride with, where you ride, and even how you feel when you ride. When I purchased my Bonneville, I fell into certain patterns without even consciously making decisions. I rode often, but found myself avoiding long trips and typically choosing back roads over highways. I'd still argue that back roads are more fun and typically have less traffic, but I can't ignore the fact that my Triumph, without any wind protection, always makes highway rides feel like long slogs, battling wind and hanging out at a high point on the tachometer in top gear. I thought this was normal, the highway not being enjoyable, until I rode my dad's Harley with all of its comforts and wind protection, and realized that my Bonneville simply was not the tool for the job. Thankfully, I've been able to ride many different types of motorcycles, and I now know all I had to do was throw on a small windscreen to my Bonneville in order to make the highway more bearable. And up until this point, I've really just willed my Bonneville into becoming a touring machine, simply because I've wanted to take longer journeys, to explore new places, to get outside of my typical riding radius. But even so, every time I get back from a trip longer than 1,000 miles, my body reminds me I'm still using the wrong tool for the job. One other area my Bonneville has struggled has been off-road. I've thrown some partial off-road Metzler tires in order to give myself a bit more confidence in the machine. But as I've traveled out west, where you can find roads that meander deep into mountain ranges and forest, I've dreamt about having a more off-road capable machine, possibly a dual sport with its long travel and knobby tires, to allow me to go travel deeper into my unknown, far beyond the limits of my current Triumph. So as a compromise and in an effort to explore the world on two wheels, I've rented 6 motorcycles over the past few years. I've seen how each type of motorcycle has truly shaped the trips I've taken. I've rented dual sports, adventure bikes, street bikes, and each choice has vastly affected the itinerary and feel of the trip. So here I find myself in Washington on a Ducati Monster 696, a bike that feels at home on asphalt roads, but limits me in my exploration beyond the pavement. I have a tent and a way to attach it to the bike, alongside some small luggage bags. But as I ride through the North Cascades, there are many forest road entrances I pass, only to have to pass them up and stay on the pavement. Why did I rent the Ducati? Truthfully, there weren't many affordable options on the peer-to-peer motorcycle rental website that I was using. People were listing their bikes for exorbitant amounts of money. I would have been better off renting a Porsche for the week rather than a bike. But the Ducati was the affordable outlier. I decided to make it work in the mountains of Washington. I decided I was going to take a road bike and push it beyond its recommended limits. I've ridden Washington before, in the Olympic Peninsula, where many of the logging roads are maintained very well. Gravel roads that meander through forests, past streams and waterfalls, alongside rivers, for miles and miles. I was able to go so deep into the Olympic National Forest that I thought I might run out of gas before getting back to civilization. But on that trip in the Olympic National Park, I was fortunate to be riding a Suzuki V-Strom. It was truly the perfect bike for that trip. Even when I was deep in the forest, I had confidence it could get me to wherever the road took me and wherever I needed to go. Regardless of how steep the road got, I never lost confidence in its suspension, traction, or power. But now I'm adventuring east of Seattle, through North Cascades National Park, around Mount Baker, and in the Okanogan-Wenatchee National Forest. My trip is anchored around Route 20, the longest continuous road in the U.S. But in Washington, it cuts through the scenic North Cascades Highway. My return route was Route 2, another highway that cuts through the mountains via Stevens Pass back towards Seattle. Beautiful curves and incredible landscapes through high elevation. The Ducati was right at home on these paved roads, effortlessly floating from peak to peak. But on this trip, I wanted to find some peace in nature, to get away from people and traffic. And to do that, it requires some dirt roads. I was only a few hours into my trip, riding north of Seattle, before I realized the Ducati Monster was not the tool for the job. It was getting dark and I was searching for a spot to set up camp in the National Forest. I passed forest road entryways that led into the shadowy forest. Some of the roads seemed too steep and some too rough, so I kept on driving, hoping to find an area that seemed well maintained and flat enough for the bike to handle. Eventually, as the sun began to set, I continued to refuse to accept the truth that the Ducati was not the right tool for the job, and I pushed it on some dirt roads, often bottoming out the front forks with every divot in the road that I hit, jolting my arms through the handlebars. And when a branch of the forest road got too rough, I reluctantly would turn around and seek out another path deeper into the woods. I eventually pieced together a route to a serene camping spot next to a swimming hole, with not another soul around. Even though I successfully found a spot, I knew that in the morning I'd have to battle my way back out of the forest just to get back to the pavement. Throughout the trip, the Ducati reminded me it was not the right tool for the job. It complained on every dirt road I took it. I didn't have full confidence in the traction when the road got too steep or had some precarious turns, or the dirt turned into a loose gravel or sand. But it was an important lesson, that the choice of motorcycle truly does shape and dictate all aspects of the trip. And I only learned that because I had ridden both dual sports and pure street bikes and could make the relative comparison between the experiences riding the different options and understanding how those options lead to certain outcomes. So next time, I'll tell myself, try something different. You might find the motorcycle takes you to a place that you didn't expect to find yourself.